April 5, 1933. President Roosevelt signs an executive order. You have 30 days to turn in your gold or face 10 years in prison. Most Americans complied. They walked into banks, handed over their gold, got paid $20.67 per ounce. 9 months later, after the government collected the gold, Roosevelt changed the price to $35. Overnight, the government stole 40% of America's wealth legally with their cooperation. That's not ancient history, that's the playbook. And on January 23, 2025, President Trump signed an executive order using the exact same language: strategic asset, national security, mandatory acquisition authority. They're not coming for your gold this time, they're coming for your Bitcoin. And unlike 1933, they don't have to search for it. They already know exactly how much you own, where you bought it, and which wallet it's in. You have months, maybe a year, to move it before the confiscation order comes. After that, it's too late. Let me show you how this works and what you need to do right now. Here's what happened in 1933 that most people don't know. America was drowning in depression, 25% unemployment, banks failing by the thousands, and the government owed massive debts from World War I. The dollar was backed by gold. Every paper dollar could be redeemed for gold at $20.67 per ounce. But as the depression got worse, people stopped trusting banks. They withdrew deposits and demanded gold, not paper. This created a run on gold reserves. The Federal Reserve was bleeding gold, and under the gold standard, they couldn't print more money without more gold to back it. The system was collapsing. Roosevelt needed to break the link between dollars and gold so he could print money. But he couldn't just abandon gold backing. That would cause panic. So he did something brilliant and evil. He confiscated the gold first. Executive Order 6102. Every American had to deliver all gold coin, gold bullion, and gold certificates to a Federal Reserve Bank by May 1, 1933. You could keep 5 ounces for personal use. That's it. Everything else? Turn it in. The penalty for keeping it? $10,000 fine. In 1933, that's equivalent to $230,000 today. And 10 years in federal prison for owning gold. Most Americans complied because they had no choice. The penalties were too severe, and frankly, they trusted their government. They thought this was temporary. They thought they were helping the country. They had no idea what was coming. After May 1st, after most gold was collected, the government waited 9 months. Then, in January 1934, Roosevelt signed the Gold Reserve Act. This did 2 things. First, it made all the gold the government had collected the property of the Treasury. Second, it authorized Roosevelt to revalue gold, and he did. $35 per ounce, not $20.67, $35, a 69% increase. Here's what that accomplished. The Treasury now owned about 195 million ounces of gold. At the old price, that was worth $4 billion. At the new price, $6.8 billion. They created $2.8 billion in value by changing a number on paper. But the real theft was what it did to Americans who complied. They turned in gold at $20.60. Now it was worth $30, but they couldn't buy it back because owning gold was illegal. It stayed illegal for 41 years, until 1974. Those Americans lost 40% of their wealth instantly, and inflation over the next decade erased another 20 to 30%. The people who trusted their government were destroyed. The people who hid their gold and didn't comply, they kept their wealth and multiplied it. Now here's why this is repeating in the United States owes $37 trillion. The debt-to-GDP ratio is 132%. In 1933, it was 40%, and they felt they had to confiscate gold. Today, it's 3 times worse. Annual interest on the debt is $1.2 trillion, more than defense, more than Medicare. And if rates stay at 5%, interest payments hit $1.8 trillion by The government cannot pay this debt. You can't tax your way out. You can't grow your way out. You can't cut spending. There's only one option. The same option Roosevelt used: confiscation and revaluation. On January 3, 2025, Trump signed an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Let me read you the key language because it's almost identical to Executive Order 6102. Bitcoin is declared a strategic asset vital to national security. The Treasury is granted authority to acquire and hold Bitcoin. Federal agencies are directed to develop policies for digital asset management. The reserve is positioned as essential to American financial leadership. Now compare that to 1933. Gold declared strategic asset vital to economic stability. Treasury granted authority to acquire and hold gold. Americans directed to deliver gold to Federal Reserve banks. Confiscation positioned as essential to recovery. It's the same words. Strategic asset, Treasury authority to acquire, national security justification. This is not coincidence. This is the same playbook updated for digital assets. Here's how the confiscation will unfold. Phase 1, legal framework. That's what the executive order accomplishes. It establishes that Bitcoin is a national security asset. When something is labeled national security, the government can do almost anything to acquire it. Emergency powers, wartime authorities, legal barriers disappear. This phase is complete. The order is signed. The framework exists. Phase 2, voluntary acquisition. The government starts accumulating Bitcoin quietly, not through market purchases that would spike the price. They're seizing Bitcoin from criminal cases. They already hold over 200,000 Bitcoin from Silk Road and other seizures. They're accepting Bitcoin for taxes and fines. They're mining Bitcoin using government-owned energy infrastructure. And most importantly, they're tracking. This is where it gets different from 1933. In 1933, gold was physical. You could hide it. Enforcement was hard. But Bitcoin exists on a public blockchain, and every American who bought Bitcoin through Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, Gemini, any exchange that required identity verification, that information was reported to the IRS. The government has a database. They know who owns Bitcoin. They know how much you own. They know when you bought it. They don't have to search. They just send you a letter. Phase 3, mandatory acquisition. This is the confiscation. The government announces that due to national security and financial stability, all Bitcoin holdings above a threshold must be sold to the Treasury. Maybe the threshold is 1 Bitcoin. Maybe 10, but above it, you must sell. The price they offer won't be market price. It'll be the official price. Maybe 50,000 per Bitcoin. Maybe 80. Whatever's below market, you're forced to sell at a discount, just like Americans in 1933 sold gold at $20.67 when real value was higher. And the penalties for non-compliance will be severe. Criminal prosecution, asset forfeiture, prison. Most people will comply because their holdings are in a database and the punishment is too severe to risk. Phase 4, revaluation. After acquiring enough Bitcoin, maybe 1 million coins, the government They announce that for balance sheet purposes, Bitcoin is worth $1 million per coin, or 500,000, whatever number makes the math work to reduce debt. At 1 million per coin, 1 million Bitcoin equals 1 trillion in Treasury assets. Combined with gold revaluation, the government suddenly has 5 to 7 trillion in assets on paper. Assets that offset debt. But here's what happens simultaneously. Once the government says Bitcoin is worth 1 million and backs it with policy, the market follows. Bitcoin goes to 300,000, then 500, then 800, then 1 million. And as Bitcoin rises to 1 million, the dollar collapses. Because if Bitcoin goes from 100,000 to 1 million, that's a 90% loss in dollar value. That 90% shows up everywhere. Food prices triple, energy costs double, housing becomes unaffordable. But the government's debt denominated in those worthless dollars becomes manageable. You get robbed, they survive. Here's the timeline, and this is critical because it's happening fast. 2025 is accumulation. The government is quietly acquiring Bitcoin through seizures and mining. They're building tracking infrastructure. The IRS is requiring exchanges to report all transactions. They're preparing for confiscation. 2026 is crisis. The debt ceiling fight becomes severe. Bond market shows stress. Yields spike. The crisis creates justification for extraordinary measures. Just like 9/11 justified the Patriot Act and 2008 justified TARP, the next crisis will justify confiscation. 2027 is confiscation and revaluation. Government announces mandatory sale above the threshold. They offer official price below market. Most comply because holdings are in databases. Then they revalue. Bitcoin to 1 million. Gold to 20,000. Dollar collapses. Debt erases. You lose. Now let me show you how to protect yourself, because there are ways to survive, but you have to act now. First, understand what they can and cannot confiscate. They can confiscate Bitcoin on centralized exchanges. If it's on Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, any KYC exchange, they know you have it and can force the exchange to freeze it or transfer it to Treasury. They can confiscate Bitcoin in BlackRock's IBIT, Fidelity's Bitcoin Fund. All the ETFs hold Bitcoin that can be seized. If you hold Bitcoin ETFs, you're holding a confiscation target. What they cannot easily confiscate is self-custodied Bitcoin in cold storage. If your Bitcoin is on a hardware wallet that you control and you bought peer-to-peer or non-KYC, they don't know you have it. This is the digital equivalent of burying gold in your backyard in 1933. The problem is most people bought through exchanges. The government already has your information. So what do you do? First, withdraw everything from exchanges now. Move to self-custody, hardware wallet, ledger, or Trezor. You hold the keys. Yes, exchanges have your purchase history. But if you move to self-custody, and then they order you to sell, and you say you lost it, forgot the password, hardware wallet damaged, proving you still have it is much harder than proving you once bought it. Second, for new purchases, use non-KYC methods. Peer-to-peer platforms, Bitcoin ATMs with low limits. Mine it yourself. These don't create database entries. Third, diversified jurisdictions. The confiscation is coming to the United States. Other countries may not confiscate. Singapore, Switzerland, certain jurisdictions with strong property rights. This requires professional advice, but wealthy people always use international diversification to protect from governments. Fourth, physical gold and private storage. Not in bank safe deposit boxes. Banks can be ordered to freeze in inventory boxes, private vault, or home safe. Fifth, Understand enforcement reality. In 1933, penalties were 10 years in prison, but prosecutions were rare. The government relied on voluntary compliance. Same will be true for Bitcoin. They'll threaten prison, but actually prosecuting millions is impractical. If you're self-custodied and claim it's lost, prosecution is unlikely. Now let me address what you're thinking. They won't do this because it would destroy trust, and America would lose financial leadership. Wrong when the choice is between survival and reputation. Governments always choose survival. Abandoning gold in 71 destroyed trust. Money printing in 2020 destroyed trust. They did it anyway because they had to. Confiscation will happen for the same reason. Bitcoin is decentralized, so they can't control it. Bitcoin's protocol is decentralized. Your ownership is not. If they know you bought it and can send you a prison threat, decentralization doesn't protect you. There would be political backlash. There was backlash in 33, happened anyway. By the time backlash matters, your Bitcoin is already gone. Here's what's really happening. The dollar, as reserve currency, is dying. The debt is unpaid. Central banks are buying gold at record rates because they know. Foreign governments are creating alternatives because they know. The US government is positioning to confiscate because they know. The only question is whether you know and whether you'll position to survive. In 1933, people who complied lost 40%. People who hid gold kept it and thrived. Same split is about to happen. People who keep Bitcoin on exchanges and comply will lose 70 to 90% when confiscation and revaluation hit. People who move to self-custody, who diversify jurisdictions, who hold real assets, they'll preserve wealth and buy at depression prices when everyone else is broke. The executive order is signed. The legal framework exists. The database of owners is complete. The debt crisis is accelerating. Timeline is 2025 to 2027. You have months, not years. Once the confiscation order comes, once mandatory sale is announced, it's over. Assets frozen, options gone. Comply or face prison. Act now. Move to self-custody this week, not next month. This week. Withdraw from Coinbase. Get a hardware wallet. Transfer your Bitcoin. For new purchases, use non-KYC. Build positions in physical gold and real assets. Prepare psychologically, because when it hits, most people will panic and lose everything. If you've prepared, you'll survive and build on the other side while everyone else starts from zero. Executive Order 6102 destroyed the middle class in 33. The 2025 equivalent will be worse because debt is higher, confiscation broader, and tracking is digital. They know what you own, they're coming for it. The only question is whether you'll be ready. Subscribe because over the next 18 months, I'll track every step, every executive order, every regulatory change. You'll see it coming and know exactly when to take final action. This is pattern recognition. 33 is repeating in 25. Position accordingly because once they execute, there's no going back. Your wealth is either protected or gone. The choice is yours. Make it now.